The gleaming hull of the HMHS Resilience caught the light of two distant suns as it made its approach to the Orion Expanse colonies. Its alabaster surface bore the Universal Red Cross insignia, magnified to interstellar proportions, a declaration of purpose, visible from neighboring star systems. Earth's flagship medical vessel represented everything humanity had become known for across the galaxy: cutting-edge medical technology, unparalleled humanitarian dedication, and crews perpetually caffeinated to the point of near transcendence. On the central observation deck, Dr. Mara Rivera watched the stars blur past through the panoramic viewport. 20 years as chief surgeon aboard humanity's most advanced hospital ship had not diminished her wonder at the cosmos, nor her devotion to the oath that drove her: every action first, do no harm. She sipped from her regulation thermos her third espresso of the ship's artificial morning cycle and reviewed the upcoming mission parameters on her neural interface. 14,000 patients expected in the first wave, she murmured to herself. Agricultural colony, respiratory epidemic, mining facility trauma cases, and the usual assortment of exotic xenobiological mysteries. The Orion Expanse was notoriously diverse, home to 17 sapient species and countless microbiomes that regularly conspired to create medical puzzles worthy of humanity's best minds. Behind her, the doors to the observation deck parted with a soft, pneumatic hiss. Dr. Rivera. The voice belonged to Captain Eliza Montgomery, the Resilience's commanding officer. Ambassador Torin is on Secure Channel 3. He'd like your assessment of the situation before we make planetary approach. Rivera nodded, setting her thermos on a nearby console. Ambassador Kale Torin was Earth's primary envoy to the Galactic Council, a pragmatic diplomat whose career had been built on a foundation of measured responses and carefully cultivated relationships. His involvement usually signaled political complications. "Patch him through to my office, I'll take it there." Montgomery hesitated. "He specifically requested the observation deck feed. Says he wants to see the Expanse as we discuss it." Rivera raised an eyebrow but nodded her consent. The main view screen shifted from navigational data to the stern visage of Ambassador Torin. His silver-streaked hair was immaculately coiffed, despite the early hour on Earth Standard Time, and his expression was one of practiced neutrality that Rivera had learned to recognize as mild concern. "Dr. Rivera, good to see the Resilience is on schedule." Torin's eyes flicked to something off-screen, likely additional data feeds. "I've just come from a rather tense council session. The Rakthor delegation was particularly vocal about human expansion into the Expanse." Rivera kept her expression neutral. The Rakthor Dominion was among the more troublesome spacefaring civilizations, a society built on rigid hierarchies and an austere approach to medicine that many human physicians found barbaric. Their representatives viewed Earth's rapid emergence as a galactic power, with open skepticism bordering on hostility. "The Rakthor have no jurisdiction in the Expanse," she replied. "Our mission is purely humanitarian, sanctioned by the Galactic Medical Association." "Indeed." Torin's mouth tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Nonetheless, I thought you should be aware. Their medical commandant Vrax made several pointed inquiries about the Resilience's capabilities. More interest than they've shown in previous missions." Rivera exchanged glances with Montgomery. The captain's hand had moved instinctively to her sidearm, a gesture that seemed almost comical on a hospital ship, but reflected the unspoken tension. "We're operating at peak capacity," Rivera said carefully. 7,000 beds, 3,000 medical staff, full surgical theaters, and quarantine facilities for up to 20 different atmospheric requirements. Standard complement. "And full defensive capabilities, I trust?" There was something in Torin's tone that sent a chill through Rivera's spine. Montgomery stepped forward. "Ambassador, we're a hospital ship. We have standard deflectors for meteoroid protection and emergency protocols for evacuation. We're not a battlecruiser." "Of course," Torin nodded. "That's precisely as it should be. I merely wanted confirmation of our operational parameters. Carry on with your mission, but maintain standard alert status. The Rakthor have been unpredictable of late. The transmission ended, leaving Rivera and Montgomery staring at the empty screen. Well, that was cryptic, Montgomery said, reaching for Rivera's abandoned coffee and taking a liberal sip. Rivera frowned. He's worried. The Rakthor view our medical ethics as weakness. Their own medical philosophy prioritizes the strongest patients, leaving the vulnerable to natural selection. Barbaric, Montgomery muttered, returning the now empty thermos. Different, Rivera corrected automatically, though her eyes remained troubled. But, yes, incompatible with our approach. Let's run a full systems check before we reach the colony. Standard procedures, nothing that would appear provocative. As Montgomery left to implement her instructions, Rivera turned back to the viewport. The stars seemed suddenly colder, more distant. 20 years of interstellar medicine had taught her that healing was universal, but definitions of harm were frustratingly relative. The Resilience continued its approach to the Orion expanse, its white hull gleaming with the promise of salvation, unaware it was being watched through targeting systems that had no business focusing on a vessel of mercy. In the darkness of space, 3 Rakthor dreadnoughts maintained perfect silence, their advanced cloaking systems rendering them invisible to conventional sensors. Inside the lead vessel, Medical Commandant Vrax studied magnified images of the human hospital ship with cold calculation. Interesting, he remarked to his second-in-command. The humans send their most advanced medical vessel completely unescorted. Such confidence, or perhaps arrogance. Commander Zexular, a veteran of 3 interstellar campaigns, regarded the magnified image with narrowed eyes. The medical insignia should protect them under galactic convention. Precisely why this test is necessary, Vrax replied. The humans have risen too quickly, bringing their chaos and their coffee. He pronounced the alien word with distaste. They distribute medical technology without considering evolutionary implications. Natural selection is the only true healer. The Council will not approve of this action, Zexular cautioned. Vrax's facial slits contracted in what passed for a smile among the Rakthor. The Council need not know our intentions. We are conducting a necessary assessment of potential vulnerabilities in galactic medical infrastructure. The data we gather will be invaluable. And the casualties? Acceptable. Prepare targeting solutions. We strike when they begin their approach to the colony. Maximum impact, maximum data collection. Zexular bowed stiffly and moved to comply, pushing aside the disquiet that stirred in his secondary nervous system. The Rakthor Dominion had always prided itself on necessary sacrifices in pursuit of advancement. This was merely another such instance. Yet, as he calibrated the weapons array, he could not help but wonder if targeting a hospital ship, even a human one, crossed a boundary that should remain sacrosanct. The thought was fleeting, dissolving in the ruthless efficiency of his training. On the bridge of the Resilience, the first indication of trouble came as a slight fluctuation in the quantum shields, so minor that it registered as little more than a footnote in the automated diagnostic systems. The second warning was more pronounced, a radiation spike characteristic of cloaking technology disengaging. Proximity alert. The tactical officer's voice cut through the calm hum of bridge operations. Multiple vessels decloaking bearing 347. Montgomery's head snapped up from her console. Identification. Rakthor configuration, Dreadnought class. The officer's voice faltered. Captain, they're charging weapons. That's impossible, Montgomery said even as she activated emergency protocols. We're a clearly marked medical vessel. Open hailing frequencies. No response. The rest of the sentence was lost as the first volley struck the Resilience's port side. The ship shuddered violently, artificial gravity fluctuating as power systems rerouted emergency resources. Warning klaxons blared throughout the vessel. In the main surgical bay, Dr. Rivera was thrown against a bulkhead as the deck lurched beneath her feet. Disorientation gave way rapidly to training and experience as she pulled herself upright. Status report, she shouted over the cacophony of alarms. Her senior nurse Prakash was already accessing the ship's systems. Direct hit to decks 17 through 24. Hull breaches in sectors 9 and 12. Life support failing in the xenobiology ward. Rivera's mind catalogued casualties and responses with mechanical precision, even as a part of her reeled in disbelief. Implement protocol sanctuary. All medical staff to emergency stations. Evacuate compromised sectors and seal contamination zones. Doctor, we have patients in those sectors, Prakash reminded her, already moving toward the nearest emergency kit. I know, Rivera's voice was steel. Priority 1 is stabilization. We move the most critical cases first. She activated her comm implant. This is Dr. Rivera to all medical personnel. We are under attack. This is not a drill. Implement emergency protocols immediately. As she spoke, the ship shuddered again, a second volley finding its mark with devastating accuracy. The lights flickered, plunging the surgical bay into darkness, before emergency systems engaged, bathing everything in a surreal red glow. They're targeting life support and medical systems, Prakash observed grimly as they rushed toward the turbolifts. This isn't random fire. Rivera said nothing, focusing instead on the flood of data streaming through her neural interface casualty report system, failures, emergency triage requests from across the vessel. The Resilience had been designed to weather natural disasters and even limited military engagements, a practical necessity for vessels operating in frontier regions. But it was not built to withstand a concentrated assault from military-grade weaponry. In the xenobiology ward, chaos reigned. The atmospheric containment systems had failed, exposing patients from multiple species to an environment that ranged from uncomfortable to immediately lethal. Medical droids were implementing emergency protocols, sealing vulnerable patients in stasis pods, but the sheer number of casualties threatened to overwhelm even the most advanced systems. Rivera waded into the crisis, directing staff with the calm efficiency that had become her trademark. Seal off Section 3. Get those Kaldorian patients into hyperbaric chambers. They can't tolerate standard oxygen levels. A young resident appeared at her side, face streaked with the bioluminescent blood of a Medusan patient. Dr. Rivera, we're losing containment in Isolation Ward 6. The Physian delegation. Move them to emergency shuttles if they're stable enough for transport, Rivera instructed. If not, initialize suspended animation protocols. The ship rocked again, and overhead a support beam groaned ominously. Rivera glanced up just in time to see it tear free from its moorings. Without thinking, she shoved the resident clear, feeling the rush of displaced air as the beam crashed to the deck mere centimeters from where she stood. Doctor, the resident scrambled back toward her. I'm fine. Rivera waved away his concern, even as she processed the near miss. Focus on the patients. That's an order. As medical teams fought to save lives within the stricken vessel, the bridge crew fought with equal determination to save the ship itself. Montgomery had ordered evasive maneuvers, but the Resilience's bulky medical configuration made it an easy target, especially against the more maneuverable Rakthor vessels. Shields at 23%, the tactical officer reported. Another direct hit to our port nacelle. We're venting atmosphere in sectors 7 through 11. Montgomery's face was grim. Have we managed to get a distress signal through? Negative, Captain. They're jamming all frequencies. Keep trying. Focus power on the shields protecting life support and patient sectors. She turned to her communications officer. What about the neural emergency beacon? Online and transmitting, but we're deep in the expanse. It could be hours before... The bridge rocked violently as another volley found its mark, consoles exploding in showers of sparks. Montgomery was thrown from her command chair, landing hard against the navigation station. Captain's down, someone shouted. Through a haze of pain, Montgomery watched as the main view screen displayed a tactical readout of the 3 Rakthor vessels moving into position for what would clearly be a killing blow. In that moment, she understood with perfect clarity that the attack was deliberate, not random aggression, but calculated execution. "Record everything," she gasped to her remaining officers. "Make sure Earth knows what happened here." On Earth, Ambassador Torin was in the middle of a council subcommittee meeting when his aide burst into the chamber, face ashen. "Sir, emergency transmission from the Orion Expanse." The formal proceedings halted as Torin excused himself following his aide into a secure antechamber. "What is it, Liang?" "The Resilience, sir. It's under attack." Torin felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Show me." A holographic display materialized between them, showing fragmentary sensor data and emergency transmissions. The Resilience was clearly visible, its once pristine hull now scarred by weapons fire, venting atmosphere, and debris into space. 3 Rakthor dreadnoughts surrounded it, methodically targeting key systems. "This is happening now," Torin asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Yes, sir. The neural emergency beacon activated approximately 7 minutes ago. We're receiving fragmented data packets. The ship's conventional communications appear to be jammed." Torin studied the tactical display, years of diplomatic training, allowing him to maintain an outward calm that belied the fury building within him. "The Rakthor representatives." "Still in the council chamber, sir." "Of course they are." Torin's smile was glacial. "They wouldn't want to miss the scheduled vote on medical technology restrictions." He straightened his formal diplomatic attire with precise movements. "Transmit all of this data directly to Earth Fleet Command Priority Alpha. Then send it to every member of the Galactic Council. Every one, Liang." "Sir, protocol dictates that we verify hostile action before—" "This is verification." Torin gestured to the hologram where the Resilience took another devastating hit. "Make sure the transmission includes identification markers for the Rakthor vessels. I want names, registration numbers, commanding officers." "Yes, sir." Torin turned back toward the council chamber, his expression now carefully composed. "After you've done that, prepare travel arrangements. We're recalling all diplomatic personnel from Rakthor space." "All of them, sir. That's over 300 people." "All of them. Site facility maintenance as the official reason." Torin paused at the door. "And Liang, make sure our defensive systems are fully operational. I don't want any unexpected Rakthor tests on our embassy." The aide nodded, hurrying away to implement his instructions. Torin took a deep breath, centering himself before re-entering the council chamber. As he took his seat, the Rakthor delegate Envoy Therax offered a formal nod of acknowledgement. "Ambassador Torin, we were concerned by your sudden departure." "Merely a minor diplomatic matter requiring attention," Torin replied smoothly. "Nothing that should interrupt our important discussions." He met the Rakthor's compound eyes without flinching, searching for any sign of awareness, any hint of the atrocity being committed under his government's direction. Therax's facial plates remained impassive, betraying nothing. "Indeed," the Rakthor envoy said. "We were just discussing the human proposal regarding unrestricted distribution of medical technology. Our delegation remains concerned about potential, unintended consequences." "I understand completely," Torin said, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Consequences are something we should all consider very carefully." In the Orion Expanse, the Resilience was dying. 3 successive volleys had crippled its propulsion systems, compromised life support across multiple decks, and rendered its shields virtually non-existent. The Rakthor vessels maintained their position sensors, recording every detail of the hospital ship's systematic destruction. In what remained of the main medical bay, Dr. Rivera worked feverishly to stabilize a young Arcturian colonist, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. The ship's artificial gravity had failed, in sections causing equipment and supplies to float eerily through emergency-lit corridors. The deck beneath her feet groaned with structural strain. "Vitals stabilizing," she announced to her team. "Prepare for stasis induction." Assistant Surgeon Lin nodded, calibrating the portable stasis unit. "Where do we move him after stabilization? Shuttle Bay 4 is at capacity." "Deck 12, Section C still has functional life support and gravity," Rivera replied, not looking up from her patient. "We've established a triage center there." That's 6 decks down and the turbolifts are offline in this section. Then we use the maintenance tubes. We've practiced for this. Lynn didn't argue, recognizing the determined set of Rivera's jaw. The chief surgeon had not paused for a moment, since the attack began moving from one critical case to another, with singular focus. If she acknowledged the near hopelessness of their situation, it would be tantamount to surrendering to accepting that the hundreds of patients under their care were already lost. The ship shuddered again, but differently this time, not the impact of weapons fire, but the deeper tremor of critical systems failing. "Doctor," a voice called over the emergency comm system. It was Chief Engineer Okafor, his usual ebullient tone, replaced by grim professionalism. "Core containment is becoming unstable. We're implementing evacuation procedures shipwide." Rivera finally looked up, meeting Lynn's eyes. "Understood. We'll begin moving patients to escape pods and emergency shuttles immediately." "Doctor," Okafor hesitated. "We don't have enough evacuation capacity for all patients and staff." The unspoken question hung in the air. Who would be left behind? Rivera's expression hardened. "Priority to critical care patients. Medical staff will assist with evacuations and remain aboard until all salvageable patients are clear." "Understood." Okafor out. Lynn stared at Rivera. "That's a death sentence for most of the medical staff." "It's our duty," Rivera replied simply. "Get this patient to an escape pod. I'll continue triage here." As Lynn and his team carefully moved the Arcturian patient toward the nearest evacuation point, Rivera turned to the next critical case, a Terran colonial administrator with severe plasma burns. Her neural interface continued to stream, casualty reports, 347 confirmed dead, 892 critical, thousands more injured. The numbers ticked upward with sickening regularity. She worked mechanically, her training overriding emotion. There would be time later for grief, for rage, for questioning how such an atrocity could be permitted to occur. If there was a later. On the bridge, Acting Captain Suresh, the highest-ranking survivor of the command staff, coordinated the evacuation efforts. Escape pods jettisoned from the dying vessel in irregular pulses, each one carrying patients and minimal medical support staff toward the nearby colony. "Status of the Rakthor vessels," he asked, voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. "Still maintaining position," the remaining tactical officer reported. "They're scanning us, sir. Detailed scans of structural damage and life signs." Suresh's expression darkened. "They're collecting data. This wasn't an attack. It was an experiment." The Resilience gave a final shuddering groan as its structural integrity fields failed completely. Throughout the vessel, emergency bulkheads slammed into place, isolating sections that still retained atmosphere. In the medical bay, Rivera felt the change immediately, a subtle shift in pressure, a new quality to the silence. "We're out of time," she said to the remaining medical personnel. "Get to the evacuation points, that's an order." The junior staff hesitated, unwilling to leave her alone with the patients, too critical to move. "Go," she insisted. "Save who you can. Document everything you've seen here." After they had gone, Rivera continued her work in the eerie silence, moving from patient to patient, offering what comfort she could to those beyond saving, and fighting desperately for those with even the slimmest chance of survival. When the hull finally breached completely, her last conscious thought was a silent promise to those under her care. This will not go unanswered. In the void of space, the 3 Rakthor vessels watched dispassionately as the once proud hospital ship broke apart, spilling its contents into the vacuum. Escape pods continued to launch from still-functioning sections, their emergency beacons broadcasting distress signals across all frequencies. Data collection complete. Commander Zexalar reported to Medical Commandant Vrax. Comprehensive structural analysis, response times, evacuation protocols all recorded. Vrax nodded with satisfaction. "Excellent. Prepare a full report for High Command. This experiment has provided valuable insights into human emergency response capabilities." "Should we target the escape pods?" Zexalar asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Many contain data records of our attack. Vrax considered briefly. No. Let them reach the colony. The chaos will provide additional data points on human crisis management. Besides, we have what we came for. The dreadnoughts re-engaged their cloaking systems, disappearing into the darkness of space, as if they had never existed, leaving behind only wreckage and the fading distress calls of survivors to mark their passage. The news reached Earth within hours, transmitted through the neural emergency beacon's fragmented data bursts and the testimonies of survivors who reached the Orion colony. The response was immediate and unprecedented. In the Terran Security Council chamber, Ambassador Torin stood before the assembled representatives, his usual diplomatic reserve replaced by cold, focused anger. The attack on the HMHS Resilience was not an act of war. He stated, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. It was worse. It was a deliberate violation of the most fundamental principle that binds civilized societies: the protection of those who heal. Holographic displays showed the destruction in vivid detail, the hospital ship under fire, patients and medical staff fighting desperately to save lives, even as their own were forfeit escape pods jettisoning into space. We have confirmed that this attack was carried out by vessels of the Rakthor Dominion, Torin continued. We have further evidence that this was not a rogue action, but a sanctioned operation, a test to assess vulnerabilities in our medical infrastructure. Murmurs of shock and outrage rippled through the assembly. The Rakthor delegation to the Galactic Council denies all knowledge of this incident, Torin acknowledged. They characterize it as a possible misunderstanding or the action of insurgent elements. Their protestations might be more convincing if their chief medical representative hadn't been discussing our hospital ship's capabilities mere hours before the attack. Admiral Helena Chen, Earth Fleet's highest-ranking officer, stepped forward. What do you propose, Ambassador? The Rakthor possess significant military capabilities. A direct confrontation would result in substantial casualties on both sides. I am not proposing war, Admiral. Torin's expression was resolute. I am proposing justice, precise, proportional, and impossible to misinterpret. He activated a secure data node, and a new series of holographic displays appeared, detailed schematics of Rakthor medical facilities, supply chains, command structures, and vessel deployments. For the past 48 hours, while maintaining diplomatic communications with the Rakthor government, we have been conducting a comprehensive analysis of their medical infrastructure. Torin's voice was clinically detached. Every hospital ship, every medical research station, every pharmaceutical production facility. We now possess a complete operational understanding of their entire healthcare system. Admiral Chen studied the displays with growing comprehension. You're suggesting a targeted operation. I am suggesting an appropriate response to their test, Torin corrected. One that demonstrates with perfect clarity the consequences of violating medical neutrality. The Council will need to approve any military action, one of the security representatives cautioned. This is not a military action, Torin replied. This is a medical intervention, and it has already begun. While the Security Council deliberated, Earth's response was being executed with surgical precision. Throughout the galaxy, seemingly routine software updates were transmitted to Rakthor medical facilities, innocuous improvements to diagnostic systems, and life support infrastructure supplied under existing technological exchange agreements. Simultaneously, human medical and research vessels shifted into strategic positions near Rakthor territory, their movements disguised as standard humanitarian rotations. Each carried specialized teams of engineers, medical tacticians, and ethical oversight officers. In the Orion colony's primary medical facility, Dr. Ilara Patel, a neurological specialist temporarily assigned from Earth, reviewed the latest reports from the Resilience survivors. The casualties were staggering: over 1,200 confirmed dead, including Dr. Rivera and most of the senior medical staff. Thousands more injured, many critically. Patel had worked alongside Rivera during her residency. The loss felt personal, a wound that medical science couldn't heal. As she documented patient conditions and mortality rates, she was approached by a tall figure in the nondescript attire of a medical administrator. Dr. Patel. The woman offered a small data crystal. Ambassador Torin sends his regards. Patel accepted the crystal with a questioning look. Who are you? Commander Sarah Blackwood, Earth, Special Investigation Division. The woman's identity implant flickered briefly, confirming her credentials. We've been analyzing the attack data. I thought you might want to know that your colleague's work was not in vain. Patel inserted the crystal into her secure reader, scanning its contents. It contained a detailed analysis of the Rakthor attack, pieced together from the Resilience's sensor logs and survivor testimonies. More significantly, it included a comprehensive operational plan titled Scalpel Strike. This is... Patel hesitated, looking up at Blackwood. Justice, Blackwood supplied. Precisely measured and administered. When Phase 1 initiates in approximately 6 hours. Blackwood's expression was unreadable. Would you like to observe the procedure, Dr.? Patel thought of Rivera, of the patients who had died under her care of the oath they had both sworn to preserve life, above all else. The conflict must have shown on her face because Blackwood's expression softened slightly. This isn't about vengeance, she said quietly. It's about establishing a precedent. No one targets healers, not without consequences. After a moment's hesitation, Patel nodded. I'll observe. Exactly 48 hours after the attack on the Resilience, the Rakthor Dominion experienced what would later be termed a systemic healthcare event. It began with subtle malfunctions, diagnostic equipment displaying erroneous readings, pharmacy synthesizers, producing medications at slightly irregular potencies, life support systems experiencing momentary fluctuations. Minor inconveniences easily attributed to routine maintenance issues. Then, at precisely coordinated intervals, the disruptions escalated. Throughout Rakthor space, medical devices simultaneously entered diagnostic cycles that never completed. Life support systems adjusted to settings just outside optimal parameters for Rakthor physiology, not dangerous, but uncomfortable. Surgical AIs developed selective processing delays when handling certain procedures. In the command center of the Rakthor Medical Directorate, alarms blared as reports flooded in from facilities across their territory. What is happening? Medical Commandant Vrax demanded, his facial plates flushing with stress indicators. Why are all systems malfunctioning simultaneously? The technical specialists worked frantically, their multiple limbs dancing across control interfaces. Unknown Commandant. The problems appear to stem from the latest software updates, but diagnostics show no malicious code. Isolate affected systems, revert to backup protocols. We're attempting to do so, but the backup systems are experiencing similar issues. It's as if... The specialist hesitated. Speak freely, Vrax ordered. It's as if the systems are functioning exactly as designed, but with parameters shifted just enough to render them problematic without triggering safety protocols. Vrax's secondary breathing slits contracted. Someone has recalibrated our entire medical infrastructure. But who would have the expertise to... He was interrupted by a priority alert. Outside the Rakthor homeworld's orbital medical station, 6 human vessels had appeared, hospital ships of the same class as the Resilience, each bearing the universal medical insignia. They would not dare, Vrax breathed, watching, as the human vessels maintained position just outside weapons range. Hail them immediately. The communications officer complied, but instead of opening a channel to the human vessels, every screen in the command center suddenly displayed the face of Ambassador Kale Torin. Medical Commandant Vrax, Torin greeted him with cold formality. I trust I'm not interrupting anything important. Vrax's anger surged. What is the meaning of this? Your vessels are violating Rakthor sovereign space, and our medical facilities are experiencing suspicious malfunctions. If this is some form of attack... Not an attack, Commandant, Torin corrected smoothly. A demonstration. You expressed interest in human medical capabilities recently. We thought a practical illustration would be more educational than a formal report. Before Vrax could respond, The transmission shifted to show imagery of Rakthor medical ships throughout their territory. Each was surrounded by seemingly innocuous human research vessels that had been positioned in the preceding days. As Vrax watched, each human ship emitted a focused energy pulse, too precise to be a conventional weapon, that enveloped the Rakthor vessels in shimmering containment fields. "What have you done?" Vrax demanded, his voice rising in pitch. "We've initiated Phase 2 of what we're calling Operation Scalpel Strike." Torin explained, his tone clinically detached. "Your medical vessels are now in a state of suspended animation, fully functional, but completely immobile. Life support systems continue to operate. Patients and medical personnel are unharmed. Your ships simply cannot move or communicate beyond their immediate surroundings." The screens shifted again, this time showing human specialist teams boarding Rakthor medical facilities throughout their territory. They moved with precision, bypassing security systems, with ease making their way to critical subsystems. "Phase 3 involves targeted system modifications," Torn continued. "Your surgical vessels are having their sterilization units adjusted, not disabled, merely recalibrated to operate at 92% efficiency. Your pharmaceutical production facilities will now produce medications that are effective, but cause mild side effects. Your diagnostic centers will function perfectly for all but the most complex analyses." Vrax stared in disbelief. "You cannot do this. It violates every principle of medical neutrality." Torin's expression remained impassive. "How interesting to hear you invoke that principle, Commandant. Our data indicates that you personally authorized the attack on the Resilience as a necessary test of vulnerabilities." The accusation hung in the air between them. Vrax's facial plates shifted in patterns that betrayed his shock. "You have no proof of such allegations," he said finally. On the contrary, Torin's image was replaced by recorded transmissions between Vrax and his fleet commanders planning the attack in explicit detail. "We have comprehensive documentation which has been shared with the Galactic Council and your own government." Vrax's composure cracked entirely. "This is an act of war. The Dominion will respond with full military force." "I wouldn't advise that course of action," Torin replied, his voice dangerously soft. "We have demonstrated our ability to neutralize your entire medical infrastructure without causing a single casualty. Consider carefully what might happen if we were to apply similar precision to other systems." He let the implication hang before continuing. "For now, we are focused solely on your medical capabilities as a proportional response to your attack on our hospital ship. All affected facilities will receive detailed treatment summaries, explanations of exactly what has been done and how it can be reversed." "Reversed?" Vrax seized on the word. "What are your demands?" "We have only 3. First, a complete and public acknowledgement of responsibility for the attack on the Resilience. Second, reparations to the families of all casualties, to be administered by the Galactic Medical Association. Third, the implementation of comprehensive medical neutrality protocols throughout your territory, with regular inspections by independent Galactic Council observers." Vrax's multiple limbs twitched with barely suppressed rage. "And if we refuse?" "Then your healthcare system remains in its current state, functional but compromised. Your citizens will receive adequate care, but nothing approaching optimal outcomes. Your medical research will progress at a fraction of its former pace. Your military will find itself increasingly burdened by personnel requiring extended convalescence." Torin leaned closer to the camera. "Make no mistake, Commandant. This is not a negotiation. It is a diagnosis followed by a prescribed treatment. The only question is how long you wish your society to suffer before accepting the cure." The transmission ended, leaving the Rakthor Command Center in stunned silence. Throughout Rakthor territory, the effects of Operation Scalpel Strike were being felt with increasing severity. What had begun as inconvenient malfunctions rapidly evolved into a systematic degradation of medical capabilities. No systems failed completely, patients were not endangered. Medical personnel could still perform their duties, but everything operated at diminished capacity, and every attempt to restore full functionality was met with elegant, insuperable resistance. On the Galactic Council, the human delegation formally submitted evidence of the Rakthor attack on the Resilience, including the recovered data logs that prove the deliberate nature of the assault. Simultaneously, they provided documentation of their response, characterizing it as a proportional intervention to prevent future violations of medical neutrality. The council chambers erupted in a cacophony of debate. Some delegates condemned the human action as an excessive retaliation. Others praised it as a measured response to an unconscionable attack. The Rakthor delegation, notably diminished without Commandant Vrax's presence, maintained that the evidence had been fabricated and demanded immediate sanctions against Earth. Ambassador Torin addressed the assembly with calm resolve. "We do not take this action lightly," he stated. "The principle at stake transcends species and political boundaries. When medical vessels are deliberately targeted, the foundation of interstellar cooperation is undermined. Our response demonstrates that such actions have consequences, while respecting the sanctity of life that the Rakthor themselves violated." The Council's Medical Ethics Board convened an emergency session reviewing both the attack on the Resilience and the human countermeasure. After 48 hours of deliberation, they issued an unprecedented ruling. While noting concerns about Earth's unilateral action, they acknowledged that the response had been precisely calibrated to create institutional pressure without endangering individual lives. More significantly, the board drafted new universal guidelines that codified the automatic application of non-lethal sanctions against any entity that targeted medical facilities or personnel. The message was clear: attacks on healers would no longer be tolerated by the galactic community. Within the Rakthor Dominion, the effects of Operation Scalpel Strike provoked a political crisis. Military hardliners advocated immediate retaliation, while medical authorities, facing growing public unrest as healthcare outcomes deteriorated, urged compliance with human demands. After 7 days of internal conflict, the Rakthor High Command, influenced by increasing pressure from civilian populations, issued a formal acknowledgement of responsibility for the attack on the Resilience. They characterized it as an unauthorized operation conducted without proper oversight, carefully avoiding mention of the strategic planning revealed in Earth's evidence. Earth rejected this partial admission, maintaining the medical restrictions. 3 days later, the Rakthor government issued a complete acknowledgement, accepting full responsibility and agreeing to pay reparations as determined by the Galactic Medical Association. The final condition, implementation of comprehensive medical neutrality protocols, proved the most contentious. The Rakthor cultural emphasis on hierarchy and natural selection made the concept of universal care deeply controversial. It was only after 2 weeks of deteriorating medical conditions throughout their territory that the government finally acquiesced, agreeing to council oversight and human-led training programs. As promised, Earth immediately began the process of restoring Rakthor medical systems to full functionality. Human technical teams worked alongside Rakthor medical personnel, explaining each modification that had been made and how to prevent similar vulnerabilities in the future. What had begun as an act of retribution evolved into an unprecedented exchange of medical knowledge, albeit one initiated under duress. 6 months after the attack on the Resilience, a new hospital ship departed Earth orbit. Named the HMHS Remembrance, it incorporated advanced defensive systems disguised within its medical configuration, not weapons, but sophisticated countermeasures designed to neutralize hostile action without compromising patient care. On its bridge stood Captain Sarah Blackwood, recently transferred from Earth Special Investigation Division to the Terran Medical Fleet. Beside her, Dr. Ilara Patel reviewed final preparations for the ship's maiden voyage. "The Orion Expanse again?" Blackwood asked, noting the navigational coordinates. Patel nodded. "We have a responsibility to finish what the Resilience began. Those colonies still need medical assistance. And our other modifications. The preventive justice modules are fully integrated," Patel confirmed. "Though I doubt we'll need them. The Rakthor have been remarkably compliant since the implementation of the new protocols. Compliance born of necessity isn't the same as genuine change, Blackwood observed. Perhaps not initially, Patel agreed. But I've been working with the Rakthor medical delegation for the past 3 months. They're beginning to understand our perspective. Some are even questioning their traditional approaches to patient selection and care prioritization. Blackwood raised an eyebrow. Conversion through coffee and compassion. Patel smiled faintly. It's more effective than you might think. Speaking of which, we have a new addition to the diplomatic staff that I think you should meet. At her gesture, a Rakthor in the distinctive attire of a medical officer entered the bridge. His movements were stiff, clearly uncomfortable in the human environment, but his formal greeting was impeccable. Commander Blackwood, I am Medical Observer Zexalar, assigned as liaison between the Dominion Health Directorate and your vessel. Blackwood's expression remained neutral, though her hand instinctively moved closer to her sidearm. Observer Zexalar, welcome aboard. The commander was second in command during the attack on the Resilience. Patel explained, watching Blackwood carefully. He has since become an advocate for medical neutrality reforms within the Rakthor government. Zexalar's facial plates shifted in what humans had learned to recognize as discomfort. I participated in an unconscionable action, he acknowledged. My presence here is part of my atonement. I have requested to serve aboard human medical vessels to understand your approach to healing. A convenient reformation, Blackwood noted coldly. Not convenient, Zexalar corrected. Necessary. Your Operation Scalpel Strike demonstrated something my people had not considered, that precision can be more powerful than destruction. That systems can be influenced without being destroyed. These are concepts that have applications beyond medicine. He hesitated before adding, I witnessed the final moments of your Dr. Rivera's work. Even as the Resilience failed around her, she continued to treat patients, including those from species traditionally considered enemies of humanity. It was illuminating. Blackwood studied the Rakthor for a long moment before nodding slightly. Dr. Rivera believed that healing transcended political boundaries. I'm not convinced the same principle applies to justice. Perhaps not, Zexalar acknowledged. But your justice spared lives while making its point unmistakably clear. There is wisdom in that approach that my people would do well to study. As the Remembrance prepared for departure, Ambassador Torin transmitted a final briefing from Earth. His expression was solemn as he addressed the ship's command staff. The Galactic Council has ratified the Healthcare Immunity Treaty, he reported. 47 species have signed, including somewhat reluctantly the Rakthor Dominion. For the first time, we have universal agreement on the protected status of medical facilities and personnel. And the enforcement mechanism, Blackwood asked. Based entirely on the Scalpel Strike protocols, Torin confirmed. Non-lethal, proportional, and reversible upon compliance. The treaty specifically authorizes signatories to implement such measures against violators without requiring prior council approval. So we've institutionalized our response, Patel observed. We've established a precedent, Torin corrected. One that will hopefully prevent similar incidents in the future. The galaxy now understands that attacking healers triggers an immune response precise, effective, and inescapable. As the transmission ended, Blackwood turned to her bridge crew. Prepare for departure. Our primary mission remains medical assistance to the Orion colonies. Our secondary mission is to demonstrate that the principles of both healing and justice continue uninterrupted. The Remembrance departed Earth orbit its white hull, gleaming in the sunlight, the universal Red Cross displayed prominently on its surface. As it accelerated toward its destination, it was joined by an honor guard of vessels from multiple species, a silent acknowledgement of the new understanding that had emerged from tragedy. Throughout the galaxy, the incident entered the curriculum of both military academies and medical schools. It became known as the Rivera Doctrine. When you strike a healer, be prepared to face surgical precision in return. In the Orion expanse, the humans continued their work of healing, now joined by observers from species that had once viewed their medical ethics with skepticism. Among them, the Rakthor learned a lesson that had eluded their evolutionary philosophy. Sometimes, the most effective power comes not from destruction, but from the deliberate withholding of harm. The surgeon's art of knowing exactly where and how to cut, and more importantly, where not to. The stars watched impassively as the galaxy's understanding of both medicine and justice evolved, moving toward a synthesis that honored the ancient principle that had started it all. First, do no harm. Unless, of course, harm comes to those who heal, in which case, the response would be measured precise and remembered for generations to come.